Not really much on the last game to go over. It's pretty clear after the game what I said, and I think it was dead on. So moving on, we improved in a few areas. We still have a long ways to go, but I was encouraged by the improvement we had in certain areas, and so we'll continue to work hard this week at Oklahoma State, and then we'll come up with a good game plan and get started when the guys get back to work tomorrow.
And Mike, when you're getting ready to play an FCS team, I know last year's FCS team was not the cakewalk that a lot of these are, but sometimes they can get pretty out of hand. Do you have some goals or some things in mind that you want to try to get accomplished for your guys when you're facing a team from the lower division?
So I told the team that overall on paper, whatever paper means, didn't mean a lot last week, but on paper, people are going to say you're a more athletic and a more talented team, and I'm okay with that. So, but I'm stressing the importance of focus, stressing the importance of us improving in all three phases, and then also understand that we always respect whoever we play. We talk about that in this culture for years here. They are averaging about 67 points a game, so sometimes that's hard to do when you're playing air. So our players are aware of that. They've got skilled guys that run around and make plays. So we need to be held accountable for ourselves and individuals, and then our three units, and then line up and go play hard. And that's what I told them last night.
Does it help that this is the last time they'll have a chance to sharpen their skills against somebody else, and the next time they'll be on a field will be Baylor?
Well, we've got a lot of sharpening to do. We're a long ways away from being a sharp tool, as you know. So we need practice. We need the practices. We still have youth. We have inexperience. We cut down mistakes considerably, but we still have more mistakes than what we would have on a very productive year per week. So we've identified those. We've come up with plans we think helps us to eliminate those as we move forward. And we need good practices this week. And, we'll worry about the next one later. But for the most part, I told them the truth. This is where we're at. This is who we are. This is who they are. This is what they've accomplished. This is what we've done this year. This is what we need to get accomplished this week, all while having a game plan for these guys just like we would anybody else.
You complimented Dom Richardson post-game the other night, but looking back on it, yesterday I was looking at the stats. He's got 36 carries now, gained 192, and his net's 192. He has not lost a yard. I value that a lot in a running back, that he doesn't lose yards.
Right. So he's a big physical runner. He's maturing some. We know that. He actually made some guys miss in space, which was encouraging. Arizona State had skill, and so I was encouraged by that. I think he understands the type of runner he is, and we need to work around his skill set, and then we need him to improve a little bit in each one of those areas.
You mentioned before you want him to miss guys a little more instead of trying to run through them. What's the challenge there, getting a guy to kind of change and do that?
Well, it's a big challenge because we are kind of who we are, right? So you've probably always wanted to do this, and if somebody came to you and said, hey, I want you to frame houses, you might not be fired up because you don't really want to frame houses. You either like to not work outside in the heat, or you like to come and jack with guys like me, one or the other. But regardless, you don't really change who you are. So it's almost like taking a quarterback and getting him into camp as a freshman and saying, hey, are you going to change his throwing motion? He's been doing it for 12, 15 years. Probably not going to change much of his throwing motion. So we're asking him to do a few things to improve his skill set, but we like who he is. We knew who he is. We knew who he was when we took him. We knew that was the style of runner he is. We know what style of runner Jaden Nixon is. We know what style of runner Ollie Gordon is. But that doesn't mean they can't improve in certain areas, and he's working to make those improvements. We also want him to master being who he is, and we're kind of seeing that growth at a very early stage.
Is there a similarity to the evolution Chris Carson went through with any of that?
Carson really kind of stayed true to who he was. When in his last year here, he was a very punishing runner, and then he ran the same way in the NFL when I saw him run. So I think there's similarities there. But you're right. As we progressed through that year where he made huge strides, he started to do a few things differently, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. But he's not going to be Kendall Hunter. He's not going to be that guy. That's not who he is, okay? So we need him to improve his skill set in a little bit where his strengths are.
Tom mentioned post-game on Saturday that he kind of banged up his ankle. How big of an impact, with that style of runner that he is, how big of an impact could that ankle be?
Well, all these guys get hit. Okay, there's two positions. Quarterbacks are going to get hit on Saturdays and not deliver blows, so they're just a freebie shot. And running backs take the most violent hits because, in most cases, they're getting hit from all different areas with guys that could potentially even have a running head start. So it's always a concern, and that's why we've had to play 3 running backs most every year that I've been here.
Do you have any updates on DeAndre Jackson? I asked last week.
On what?
DeAndre Jackson.
Should stay today. I mean, I'm waiting just like you.
Are there any calls you can make about that? Or I don't know if that's on the
Any
forefront
what?
of your mind, calls to kind of get that situation
Calls?
expedited? Yeah.
Yeah, you ever called like your phone service and get an automated system? Have you ever called you probably hadn't had to turn in insurance yet, right, in your life? Well, if you call an insurance company, you'll get an automated system and they'll pass you 3 or 4 numbers. Essentially, they don't want you to call and turn your claim in because they don't want you to pay them. And that's what happens when you call them. They pass it to somebody else and eventually nobody answers.
Coach, after getting to watch the defense week 1 to week 2, now that you've gotten to see the week 2 film more in depth, what did you see the major improvements were?
We were better at communicating. I mean, you guys watched the game. In the first game, we left gaps open multiple times, turned guys loose in the red zone in coverage. We were much better. We still have ways to go, but we're improved. I'm pleased with the improvements we made from week 1 to week 2, but those improvements aren't to a point now to where we can be successful for the remainder of the year. We need more improvements this week. So, as I've said multiple times, as coaches, we're responsible for that. We have to look and say, here's what happened. Why did this happen? What's the plan to solve it? Put that plan in place and make it better. I saw that take place, but I need to see that again this week in all phases. Just like offense, we were a better run blocking team in the second half than we were in the first 5 quarters of the season, or 5 halves, or a first half, second half, 3 halves. Got much better. I don't know why, but we were. That's the way it needs to be from start to finish in order for us to continue to improve each week.
When you talk about better communication on defense, does that start with one position group, one guy in particular, or does that have to be everybody? How does that work?
Yeah, much more communication now than ever, particularly in the back end. Defensive line communicates some, but not like safeties, corners, and linebackers. And I said this last week, but just as a reminder, those guys that were playing linebacker and those safeties last year that played for us had played 1 million games. So their communication was somewhat just a given. These guys are learning that. And so it was better, but we still have to improve on it. And the other team knows. I mean, they know exactly what the issues are. Most coaches can identify youth on either side of the ball, and they're going to go right at it. It's just like you watch an NFL game. Corner leaves the game or safety leaves the game, it won't be but 2 or 3 plays, and they go right after that guy. Tom Brady and those guys, that's exactly what they're going to do. I watched it last night in the fourth quarter in that game, and Dallas showed certain things, and he saw it 2 out of the 4 plays in a row, and he checked to the speed cut by the inside receiver. When he saw a man coverage, he was covered up on a safety, and he hit it twice. Same thing that coaches do at this level.
You have more than a few old souls on your team, guys that act older than they, maybe even older than they are, but when you look in particular at Brennan, Evers and Brock Martin, are they throwbacks? I mean,
Yeah, sure. Well, and it's interesting. I talk to the team a lot about our discipline and toughness, and explain to them and define that for them so they understand what that actually means, right? So most young people that we communicate with today, you can tell them something and they shake their head. They have no idea what you're talking about unless you question them and ask them. And the other day I talked to the team about it and how important it is and the way this culture was built. And when we were done, Brock walked up and put his arm around me and said, Coach, really all I have is discipline and toughness because I'm really not that good. He goes, I just kind of live on discipline and toughness. And I said, well, there's 2 things. 1, that's true. 2, you are pretty good because you choose to do that. And you are tougher than most people that step on the field. So, yes, those are throwback guys from the day. And Evers is like a 30-year-old man. You know, he's working on his 3rd degree or whatever. He's got, I don't know how many degrees he's got here, and he's getting his education, and he's a role player. And, you know, they get beat up. You see them in games, they get hurt. You know, they're like 10-year vets in the NFL. You know, they come over and they, you know, smoke a cigarette and they go back out and play 10 more plays. I mean, that's what they do. You know, just like the guy that played first base back in the day for the Cubs. Hernandez, right? And Don Mattingly, you know, they'd burn one in the dugout and go back out and hit a double opposite field.
The name Ben Bowie came up on our broadcast the other night.
He's a throwback.
I said I would pay to see Ben Bowie in his prime go against Evers. That would be.
It would be a battle that you'd have to turn the lights on for, because neither one of them would ever give in. Bowie's like the guy that you fight in high school, and then if you end up winning the fight, the bad news is you have to fight him tomorrow. And then he probably wants to fight again the next day. And that's Bowie. You know, he came to practice about 2 weeks ago. And we were kind of reminiscing a little bit about you know, when he walks in, he doesn't really look like a guy that could block Tommy Harris, I think his name was, that played at OU. And then that one game out here, he dominated Tommy. No business doing it. And he said that Dvorak was the problem. He said Dvorak was the real issue there. But he's a throwback guy, and Brock and Evers, they fall in that same category.
Coach, how have you seen Preston Wilson adjust under center and kind of become a leader of that fast tempo offense?
He's doing good. Preston is learning to navigate that particular position, which is not easy. You know, they kind of control everything. So you've heard me say a lot of times that this offense is simple except for the quarterback. And it's simple somewhat except for the center. Those two guys really thrive on experience, and he's not had as much at that position. But I'm pleased with where he's at this point in not having a lot of experience navigating the offensive line, because we rely on them to do a lot. So I'm pleased with where he's at, but he studies all the time. Like when I walk the halls yesterday and today, he's there studying, watching tape on his own. He's dedicated to the concept. But he also is similar to the communication that Jenny brought up with who's responsible on defense for that communication. It's the same thing. He's communicating to everybody, including the quarterback at times. And the defensive guys are communicating with each other. And there's youth in those spots, and that's why it's not where it needs to be, but I'm pleased with where he's at now compared to the first game.
You talked to the offensive line to see after Central Michigan. What did you see from them this past weekend?
A grade?
Yeah, grade.
Yeah, I give them every bit of a B this week, because in the second half, they were physical and covered guys up in the run game. And I might have said this after the game, but our defensive line took the game over in the second half, and our offensive line and running backs took the game over in the second half. Much different than what we did in the first week.
Do you think you learned anything new about those guys, or was it just a matter of execution?
The offensive line? Yeah. He just covered guys up. So when you have the style of backs that we have, with the exception of 23. 23 is a Kendall Hunter kind of guy once he grows up and gets mature and a little stronger. The other guys are going to run through arm tackles. So we need to cover guys up. If we cover defensive linemen and linebackers up, we can run through arm tackles. You throw no hitters and you have missed assignments and turn guys loose, these guys aren't going to make – like last year, Jalen Warren made guys miss for no gain and then got yards because he had that side-to-side ability. These guys aren't there yet. So if you don't cover a guy up, then you're probably going to have minimal yards. You're looking at a 2-yard gain. So we just need to cover guys up.
Preston, real quick, you've talked in the past about how much quarterback the position has changed since 20 years or when you played. Whatever.
Really, it's changed in 5 years.
Yeah. Is center right up there? too? In terms of,
Yeah, I would say, I never really thought of it that way, but we see so many different looks now. We see 4 down, we see 3 down, we see 3 down with mug backers, we see 4 down with walked up backers, we see 3-3 stack, and nobody stands still anymore. So it's become somewhat complicated for centers, just like it has quarterbacks. I mean, I never really thought about that, but I would say it's might be just as complicated now for them over the last 5 to 6 years as it is for quarterbacks with the different designs and defenses.
Mike, you talked recently about how much you enjoy the administration you're working with right now. A guy that we haven't really asked you about is Reed Sigmund, and I know he's maybe not interact with him as much as Chad. I don't know, but what's been your impression of him in the last year and what he's brought to your program?
So Reed has been fantastic, and I mentioned that we have a really good chain of command, in my opinion. We have a president who is very supportive, but says we have an athletic director that runs this department. Also, I'm going to support you, and he's learning on the run. Chad's been fantastic, but you can't just show up as an AD and be an AD. It takes time. You got to start somewhere, but it takes time. He's learning. Reed has been huge for him because Reed works directly with football. Reed's a football guy. He's been at football schools. He understands what it takes, and so that's been a huge lift for us. And he communicates directly with Chad, and 95%, maybe more than that goes on, doesn't ever come back on my desk because they handle it, make good quality decisions. It's not always been yes, coach, but there's a good decision made for whatever reason, even if it's not something that maybe we want. And he's been huge because he understands in the big picture what it takes to be successful in football.
I mean, I've obviously interacted with him a lot less than you do, but he seems very analytical. He sort of brings a pretty intelligent mentality, I would think. How does that play when you talk about big picture? Is he able to see those things that maybe you're not even anticipating or thinking about?
So most people we come across in life, if they're talking a lot and going really fast, they're trying to convince you that they're smart, intelligent. Smart people sit and listen and don't have to cover themselves for that. Reed just sits and listens because he's very intelligent. He's very analytical, and he has a lot of experience in what he does, so he gets it. So all he's doing is gaining information and spitting it back out if he needs to at some point, or he's already made a decision in his mind. He's just going to clear it through the boss and then bring it later, and that's what he does. He sits and thinks and listens. And what was the cartoon guy, the mad scientist cartoon guy? You got young kids when they were going on. He was in the chemistry lab all the time. Dexter the Laboratory. Yeah, you know him. He's a good man. Okay, no, I'm talking about, but I thought maybe your kids would have watched it. But anyway, Dexter Laboratory. That's kind of like Reed. Like he figures it out. He's smart. He's like all this, and he comes up with a plan. But he's been fantastic for us again for 2 reasons. One, he's a good communicator. 2, he's been at big time football schools and he gets it.
Last thing I'll ask about him. Is there an area where you can point to and say, we're better in this, definitely because of Reed's influence?
Communication. So in order for President's going to do whatever she wants to do. We all report to her. And then in order for us to function, we need good communication from the head football coach to the athletic director, and then who's ever in charge of football, which is basically Reed. And if we have good communication and we're all on the same page, right or wrong or indifferent, we can accomplish things. When there's not a good line of communication, then things get stopped, and then the factory doesn't produce anything because there's no engine in the car because the factory stopped. So he's really good at communication, and that keeps things flowing.
It seems like Samuela's had a pretty good start to the year. Has
He
that
has.
surprised you at all? What
No,
have you seen from him?
he's growing up, maturity, experience. Last year we had so many guys, he didn't get as many reps as what he would have if we had a really, really good defensive line last year. So now he's playing more. He's learning to push through a little fatigue. His technique's better. His shoulders stay square. He's not getting turned as much. He's flat backed. He's staying low. And what you're seeing is right. He's improving and getting a little bit better. He should be considerably better in a month.
He played a lot of, maybe it's true freshman year, redshirt freshman year, something like that.
Yeah, and then not so much after that for a while.
What's kind of went into that? Just
Just
guys in
players,
front of
just
him?
guys, Izzy was here. Izzy's on the practice team for one of those pro teams. I mean, we had good players here. guys that were just playing in front of him.
On the defensive line, we all know about the depth you got at end, but how comfortable are you with what you've got at defensive tackle from a depth perspective?
I mean, we're not quite as deep there as we are at the end. That's why we play Lacey some inside and outside for that reason. I mean, I would always like to have another 300-pounder. You can't ever have enough of those guys, but I'm not going to complain because we're far better from a depth standpoint than what we used to be. You know, Dave and I were talking last week on a radio show. Shane Jarka was playing 65 plays a game for us at one time. I mean, he could have filed charges against us for that. You know, his body and he's not ready. He wasn't prepared for that. We didn't have anybody else. But fortunately, we don't have those issues now, so I'm not going to complain too much.
Something after the game that stuck out was Tyler Lacey said he likes watching tape on a lot of guys in the pros.
Who's that?
Tyler Lacey. He likes watching a lot of pro tape.
Right. So we talk about that quite a bit, particularly pass rushers. Talk about that quite a bit, particularly pass rushers, because they use, you know, the other night, whenever that game was, I don't know, Von Miller was playing against somebody, and I came home and watched it in the fourth quarter. And you can watch his pass rush and his technique and his path and his shoulder dip, getting his pads down and ripping under and then bending around and grabbing a quarterback's legs. That's the one position, defensive rushers, defensive end that rush the passer, that you can learn from watching, in my opinion. You know, years ago, when I was, I don't know when it was, 20-something years ago, I was visiting with Coach Holder about teaching golf. And he said, in his opinion, the best thing a young kid can do until he's 12 is turn the TV on and watch those pro guys on TV and watch their swing. He said you can learn from that. And then once you get to be after 12 years old, maybe we can teach you a little bit of golf, but you should just watch TV all the time and just watch these guys swing. Now, obviously, I don't know anything about golf, but I think it's the same at the defensive line position, that if I was a defensive lineman, I would watch the cut-ups of, I say cut-ups, that shows how old I am, watch the videos on Twitter, I guess is where they find them, of these guys as pass rushers, because you can learn a trade and techniques from those guys.
Obviously, you have one of those former guys who's now in the NFL, in Ogba. I mean, he's been one of the top sack guys. Is there anything from his film here that you could tell guys that, you know, this is what he was able to do that made him so successful, made him an NFL guy?
Yeah, I think it's some of the same. They watch guys that have been here, but I think they're more infatuated with the NFL. I mean, that's what they like to see, right? They dress like them on game day. They turn their pants into shorts, and they do, you know, I saw Lacey, I don't know how many sacks he had Saturday, but one time he did, you know, that. And somebody in the NFL does it. I don't know who it is. I've seen it, so I'm for it. I'm all for it. But they like to pattern themselves after NFL guys.
Mikulski and Woodard split reps at right guard. Was there something that went into that? Or?
No, just trying to keep guys fresh. You know, there's two positions on the field that we don't play anybody other than the starters, and it's offensive line and quarterback. That's just the way it's always been. So we're trying to facilitate guys that have practiced and have shown in practice they're good enough to play. The question I've had to the coaches is, why don't they play some? Let's see if they can play. They've shown us in practice that we think they can perform. So, one, we can rest a guy. Two, we can get a guy some experience. So why wouldn't they play? You know, I think it's interesting what Harbaugh's doing at Michigan with quarterbacks. And, I mean, I don't know anything about it, don't know anything about the quarterbacks, don't know anything about Coach Harbaugh, I don't know anybody. All I know is what I read, where he said, I have two guys that both look like that they're good enough to play. I'm going to play them both. And I think sometimes as offensive line, we just don't ever think about doing that. But we have other guys that can play, so why not play them some? And that's where that came from.
Obviously, you don't know what's going to happen this Saturday night, but over the last 2 years, since the new fresh redshirting rule has been implemented, you know, an FCS opponent is a time that you can take advantage of that rule and get some guys in. Do you think that's people are taking advantage of that the right way? And
yeah, I think it's a good rule from the standpoint of it was put in because if you had a player that came in late in the year because of injuries, you didn't want him to burn a year playing 2 or 3 games or whatever. So it's a good rule. When the portal came in, and then that was a part of it until they got a grasp on the portal, it wasn't a good rule because then it became free agency with no restrictions, which is not good, in my opinion, for college football, for anybody. Now we have a better grasp on portal, so I think it goes back to being a good rule again. And if we play well enough and get to a point, there's players that we have we'd like to get in and see them play. We got to get to that point to start with. But if we do, historically here, we're going to pull our guys off the field as fast as possible if we're lucky, make a difference. And it's been unusual. We had games last year, early in the year, that we thought that was going to happen, and it was all we could do to win the game. And then we got into conference play, and we played much better, and we had games where we could do that. So we haven't been fortunate enough to really predict a lot of that around here. But if we do, there's guys that will get on the field. In particular, we'll use a lot of early entry, young freshmen that have walked onto the program. We'll use them on special teams and give them a chance to go out and play on the college football field and show them our appreciation for them being a part of our team. We'll do that as soon as we can. If we feel like that we have the game in hand, we're going to get guys off and we're going to let everybody else play.
Coach, going back to Lacey, I know on Saturday you said him coming back for one more year was either the best decision he made or a great decision. In your opinion, what did he gain this offseason that's given him the production he's having?
Yeah, so that was just my opinion on him. I'm seeing another year of maturity. I'm seeing his practice habits. I'm seeing him train in the weight room. I'm seeing his leadership skills. And the guys that play at that level, particularly, like, if you watch, they're grown men, 330-pound physical men. And so for him to have another year of maturity and experience and strength and speed and technique development gives him the best chance, in my opinion, to help us be a really good defense, and it gives him the best chance to make an NFL roster, in my opinion. That's the one position, whether he's going to be whether they see him as an outside guy or not, I don't know. But if he slides into being an inside guy, those are like really big, strong guys. And I can imagine another year of maturity wouldn't help him.
Hey, Mike, Colin Clay is a guy that has come back from injury. What's been your impression of him so far and just how he's dealt with all that? I know obviously we talked a bunch about defensive line, how deep you guys are there, just the challenge he's faced to get back out there.
We need to get him more plays, and it's nobody's fault. It's just the way that it worked out. But he's been fantastic from a standpoint of coming back from a traumatic injury and working his way back and practice. He's practicing hard. He's getting back into the flow. He gets a little better each week. We need to get him on the field more. And then same thing with Trace Ford. You guys watched it. He was different in this game than he was in the first game. And so I think he's starting to clear his mind a little bit, and Colin's in the same category. We're going to work to get him on the field more.
Colin comes from a family that's pretty outgoing and hard charging. You see his brother up on the jumbotron all the time. His dad's a preacher. Like, how is how's Colin's personality? Is it similar in any ways, and has that translated into him pushing to get back out there?
It's interesting. It's just like I always say I have 3 of them, and they're supposed to be from the same mom and dad, supposedly, but they're all different. Okay? Colin is the complete opposite of them. Never says a word. Unless I speak to him, I don't think I've ever heard him talk. The young one has talked more in one day than he's talked in his life. And obviously his dad's a preacher, and he loves to talk. So it's interesting. Colin is just as quiet as they come. Great kid.
Did you see Malcolm's hip toss from yesterday?
Malcolm?
Yeah.
I did not. I have not seen anything on any of that. I've heard great things about him, but I did not see anything. No, I didn't see anything on Malcolm. I saw Jalen Warren pick up a twisting lineman and bench press him to the ground. Somebody sent me that. That's the one thing I saw.
It was a pretty wild weekend for college football as well. Was there any game that you saw final score of that really shocked you?
I didn't really watch much. I was up here most of the day. Obviously there's some surprises out there, but They don't really surprise me much. You guys know how I feel about it. We live in a time where 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23-year-olds are easily distracted. And they don't focus, and you don't focus, you don't practice well, turn it over a time or two, the other team makes a couple big plays, you in the fourth quarter, and before you know it, things get tight, and you don't play well, and you can lose. And that's what can happen. None of us focus well, right? We're all the same. If we don't get something we like, we swipe our phone and go to something else real quick. That's what we all do. That's the world we live in. And so it's a huge, huge factor. People discount it, saying that it's just coaches talk. It's not. If you don't focus, it's like I told the team last night. You guys got a choice to focus and understand our game plan and practice hard this week to play the best you can Saturday. Or you don't. You can think that you're playing a team that's not as good as you. You can think that you're trying to get ready to go on an open week, and maybe you're going to play the next team. And the truth of the matter is, you won't play very well. So I think a lot of times people don't put enough into, if you can't keep them focused, it's really hard for them to play well every Saturday. And certainly that's what we have to do at Oklahoma State. We don't have the luxury of rolling our helmets out on the field and saying we're going to win. It's never been that way here.
You've always said that the polls shouldn't come out as early as they do. Does a weekend like this past weekend kind of go into that where you don't really know who's the best team?
I mean, I don't think there should be any polls till October 1st, just because how do we really know, right? I mean, we don't know. I mean, you see things that, you know, I don't even know who's ranked really where. I know where we are because y'all tell me, but I don't pay much attention to it. There's teams in it, and everybody says it's good conversation, right? It's good social media stuff. That's why we do it. That's why somebody does it. But October 1, usually have a pretty good feel for where everybody's at. And I think that's probably a fair estimate. There's teams that are going to be ranked in the top 15 in the country that don't deserve to be ranked in the top 15 in the country. And there's teams that are in 25 to 35 that probably deserve to be in the top 15. We just don't know it yet. So, but it doesn't hurt anything. I don't put any stock into it. And I tell our team, I hope you don't put any stock into it, because you're really only as good as tomorrow's practice, period. We don't have the luxury of taking many days off.